2 years after the release of the first Silent Hill, Japan would see the arrival of a portable title in the series, and technically the first sequel of Silent Hill. It was called Play Novel Silent Hill for the Game Boy Advance, released as a Day 1 title for the new Nintendo handheld on March 21st, 2001. While some members of KSET, or Konami Computer Entertainment Tokyo, would be involved in the game, most of its actual development was farmed out to Wilco Ltd., a Japanese company that would develop a multitude of various titles from 1990 through 2015. Most of these were small titles, many only releasing in Japan. Their most famous title in the West is likely the 3DS game Mario & Luigi Paper Jam. For KSET's involvement, the story would be given a glance over by Imamura Akihiro and receive his approval. Members of the publicity team would remain the same, and much of the game's resources would be developed using the original game's resources. The game was fine. It was a genre of game the West would call a visual novel, but in Japan the concept's more varied and has a long history. Sound novels, visual novels are variations on a style of game that focuses on the player's ability to interact with and change the narrative in some form. Many of them include heavy focus on relationships with fictional characters, which would evolve into the dating sim genre. Others were, like the play novel, focused on a horror experience, and the ability of the player to interact with a spooky environment. It's not the most detailed or complex visual novel. The choices didn't make a huge difference in the narrative, an obvious consequence of the fact the game's narrative is fixed. Silent Hill itself has multiple endings, but much of the overall plot is the same throughout the game. It had an extra chapter that could only be unlocked via a connection to a mobile phone, a feature that was ended in 2002 and has likely become lost media. Play Novel included some basic puzzles, 2 storylines, including a newly invented one following Sybil Bennett through Silent Hill, and the text was written from the point of view of the main character, walking the player back through the events of the first game. Monsters would appear and had moving sprites that were hauntingly rendered, and CG cutscenes from the game were reproduced on the handheld, something that was surprising and impressive for such a device at the time. For fans of the series looking for a fix, it was a fine title. You would get a few hours entertainment out of it, and you could take it on the go. It was more expensive than most GBA titles at the time, 5,800 yen, which was about 1,000 more yen than average. And there are some reviewers in Japan who are genuinely into the game, and many more who were about it. And that would have been it. Except it wasn't. The Play Novel was announced at an event called the Nintendo Space World 2000 in August of that same year. At the time, the title of the game was tentatively Silent Hill AGB. The originally proposed title for the game would never be used. Perhaps because Konami wanted its fanbase to forget their decisions in regards to said title, and the anger that ensued. Before the game was ever officially announced, Konami filed for a copyright related to the game. This copyright was not for a device or a new IP, but for a concept, or as many fans said, for a noun. Visual novel, a genre of game that had existed for some time, and a word that appeared in the title of many other games in the genre. It seemed Konami wanted to own the word, so only they could ever use it in their games. That would be enough to infuriate any fanbase, especially one as passionate as the Japanese fans of visual and sound novels. But it was much, much worse. Because this wasn't the first time Konami had tried it. Throughout the early 2000s, Konami filed about half a dozen of these noun patents, trying to copyright the right to use words that had common usage in Japanese game circles. Words used to refer to musical games like Dance Dance Revolution, targeting creators of other music games like Jaleco and Namco. They tried to copyright the names of professional sports organizations and even the players themselves, so that only their baseball games could have recognizable, famous players in them, leading to a short halt of a Square Enix game that was about to release at the same time. Over the next few years, Konami would be involved in multiple copyright claims and subsequent legal battles, that would infuriate fans and trouble developers across the country. Another legal battle around the same time would be swept into this general rise of anger, a legal battle centered on Tokimeki Memorial, almost certainly K-Set's most popular and profitable title in Japan. It's a visual novel series centered on personal and romantic relationships, and fans become very attached and dedicated to them. One of the romantic options in the game was much harder to obtain than the others, so a fan took advantage of an element of coding meant for development to more easily obtain said character. Then, he put it on a memory card, and later sold the card to another person. The sale is what led to Konami suing the fan. A single fan selling a single card that barely tweaks the game experience for a single person. Compared to these other legal battles, this one seems more reasonable, since modifying games has long been a gray area, and selling modifications a very risky proposition. But it's still a pretty vindictive case, given the negligible effect a singular sale could ever have had on Konami, and it seems most fans agreed this was ridiculous. Add to that a legal battle a few years before centered on suing those who drew Tokimeki Memorial Dojinshi, or fan comics, and to that all the various ridiculous copyright claims Konami was making which were negatively affecting other games and companies, and you get one very pissed off Japanese fan base. But why was Konami going after all these copyrights? One article writer theorizes it was a long-standing rule at Konami to file for copyrights as soon as a concept was begun, due to an incident in which a game's title was swiped before it could be released. And so, when the Silent Hill GBA game began production, Konami immediately filed for a trademark on the proposed concepts and title so they wouldn't lose it, and that included visual novel. They'd been doing it since around 1989, but with the spread of internet access and the accumulation of other lawsuits and actions fans disagreed with, what could have been a small unnoticed problem fanned the flames of fan hatred. In 2000 and beyond, multiple fan sites spring up that are dedicated to bringing Konami's actions to light and gaining support for their various movements, which fell into three categories. Improve Konami, dedicated to encouraging the company to do better. Protest Konami, dedicated to bringing fans together to critique the company's actions. And Boycott Konami, those who were incensed enough to stop giving Konami their money until changes were made. In the early internet, it was common to use small images or badges as additions to your signature in chat rooms or as a marker on your fan site, as a way of showing what you were interested in or supporting. On websites, these badges could link to other sites, acting as a network of sites associated with the same thing. Fans in the anti-Konami network used badges that read, in English, Protest Konami or Boycott Konami, and many websites from this time are littered with them. There were chat rooms dedicated to discussing Konami's sins. There were petitions to sign where fans would put their names and their specific complaints or demands to the company. Most impressively, what seems to be the main Boycott Konami website, which covered all the various controversies, and kept a dedicated record of the court cases and press releases, and even discussed copyright law with experienced lawyers, and updated into 2001. It appears they may have been forced to stop updating. The machine-translated language is vague, but they insisted on keeping the website itself available as a record of the past. Some of the links are permanently dead, but much of the record of Konami's various controversies in the early 2000s are very much present. Other similar sites can still be found in the Wayback Machine, but none are as complete as Ken197X's Boycott Konami. I stumbled upon all this from Googling the Japanese name of the play novel Silent Hill. I was expecting a few brief blogs about the game, and I found a hornet's nest of early fan anger and frustration. Some of these copyright cases would be thrown out, like the visual novel copyright, which Konami was not given. As a response, the GBA game was called Play Novel, rather than Visual Novel Silent Hill. Other cases went their way, it seems, such as some of the musical copyright cases. I don't think the rights to baseball players did, though reading through machine-translated legal documents makes parsing these things difficult. More than anything else, this is a sign of some of the earliest documented anger at Konami's business-first behavior, and their lack of concern for their fan base, the creative field they work in, or the public image they possess. long before "Fuck Konami" became a popular slogan in the West. It seems Japanese fans in the early 2000s were chanting "Boycott Konami," seemingly to little success. This video is the final piece of my History of Silent Hill cassette series. If you've enjoyed this video and haven't seen the other videos, please check them out. And you can learn more about the people who made the first 4 Silent Hill games if you check out my book, The History of Silent Hill Volume 1, now available in ebook, hardback, and paperback. Head to my Ko-fi page to take a look. It includes extra content that didn't make it into the videos, as well as a full bibliography, including about 10 pages of tweets from game developers, and they're all Batman approved. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.